Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host Rashid, and finally, I was looking at the screen and it seemed like we weren't making it up to Rumble. It seems like it was we were being blocked or whatever on Rumble. We're waiting for Carl to join us in the chat, so hopefully the technical problems are solved. If not, we'll do a short show just to keep you enlightened, and then we'll bring it back on another time. But I want to give these announcements before we go further, and then we'll make these announcements, the same announcements throughout the show as more people join us. Tomorrow morning, this is something that just came to me maybe 20 minutes before the show. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, join me over at Real Truth Talk. The Real Truth Talk channel. It's called Real Truth Talk. Go join me over there. I was asked to help co-host the show with Scott Ritter on Real Truth Talk. So I'll be over there in the morning time. So please join me over there. Also, Friday, we'll have Scott Ritter in the building at 9 o'clock Central Time on the Red Pill Diaries. Okay. So look forward to those things. We're really trying to give you a lot. We're trying to educate everybody as to what is actually going on. And I see my man is getting in the building right now. Without further delay, my guy, my friend, I got to bring him on. Carl, how is it going today, man?
Hi, Rashid. Good morning. Good evening. Good afternoon, wherever you guys are.
Carl, well, let's start, first of all, with the ramblings in Congress about not having the money to fund the Ukrainian war. Now, before we start discussing it, I want to play two short clips that will take us back to when the United States was promising Ukraine and everybody else the world. And now we see that everything has changed very quickly. So let me play two short clips. One is by the U.S. administration and one is by its lackey, NATO. So we'll go with the U.S. first. Okay.
President Biden on the final leg of his mission to Europe. He's in Finland this morning after making a pledge of support for Ukraine at the NATO summit in Lithuania.
We will not waver. We will not waver. I mean that. Our commitment to Ukraine will not weaken. We will stand for liberty and freedom today, tomorrow, and for as long as it takes.
Elizabeth Schultz is with the president in Helsinki. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, George. In the final stop of this trip, President Biden is taking a victory lap, touting the expansion of the NATO alliance to include Finland and soon Sweden. Biden just met with the president of Finland, insisting that the U.S. and Nordic allies are more united than ever against Vladimir Putin, with Russia's border just about 100 miles from here. It is a split screen from almost exactly 5 years ago to this day, when former President Trump met here with Putin. In that major speech in Lithuania, Biden blasted the Russian leader for underestimating how the U.S. and its allies will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. They're now pledging long-term security guarantees. And after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky sharply criticized NATO countries, yesterday he struck a much more positive, grateful tone in an hour-long meeting with President Biden. Both leaders calling that meeting a success. But at the end of the day, there is still no timeline for when Ukraine could join the NATO alliance, even after the war ends. George.
Okay, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube.
Now we go to the second clip. And this is it's a short clip also. So listen to this.
So today, leaders have endorsed NATO's new strategic concept. It makes clear that Russia poses the most significant and direct threat to our security. In the current concept, we state that Russia is a strategic partner. Ukraine can count on us for as long as it takes. They are fighting for their independence, but they're also fighting for values which are important for NATO, fundamental for NATO. The sovereignty, the territorial integrity of every nation, and therefore this matters for our security. The decision to invite Finland and Sweden to become members demonstrates that NATO's door is open. It demonstrates that President Putin did not succeed in closing NATO's door. NATO's door remains open. Allies are also investing more in modern capabilities, contributing more to NATO deployments and exercises, and we have agreed to increase NATO's common funding.
With those two videos, how they're promising to stay forever, to fund it and to infinity. What changed is specifically because I'm reading an article saying the Pentagon warns Congress U.S. will run out of Ukraine aid funding by December the 30th. So what happened to all this? We will stand by you. We will give you everything you want. We will bolster you. We will make you defeat Russia at all costs. What happened to all of that?
Well, I think there's two things at play here. One is they underestimated Russia and they overestimated themselves. As we can see, the U.S. industrial production, European industrial production just can't keep up to supply artillery shells to Ukraine. You know, the Hollywood and mainstream media has conditioned us to believe U.S. wonder weapons, NATO wonder weapons will have such a technological edge over Washington's enemy. You'll be a cakewalk, right? But at the end of the day, when your F-35s are becoming submarines, and the Ospreys falling out of the sky in Okinawa, and you can't even produce basic stuff like 155 millimeter shells, and because on the battleground, artillery is still the king. But guess what? Why U.S. spend $1 trillion on defense budget yet cannot produce 155 millimeter artillery shells? That's where the money is. The money is in the big, bloated, expensive project like the F-35 boondoggle. The amount of money to spend F-35, there's enough to go around to the military contractors, to the lobbyists, to all the kickback to all the top military brass. That's what greases the wheel. 155 millimeter shell, they don't make money from that. Why? Officials in Pentagon, those industry lobbyists, there's a very low margin in 155 millimeter shell. So U.S. in its infinite wisdom, as if you think of U.S. as kind of capitalist oligarchy, driven by the Wall Street types, that's exactly what it is. Because the way they look at it, it's like, okay, this doesn't make us money, so we'll outsource it. We don't need to produce 150 millimeter shells in the United States, like some other country can produce it, maybe South Korea. So what we ended up with is, on paper, United States is the most powerful country in the world. But when it comes to reality, the amount of money you can print money all you want, but at the end of the day, that's not going to get you 155 millimeter artillery shells for Ukraine. Now, on the second hand, Israel-Palestine conflict happened, and we all know when it comes to Washington, Ukraine, Taiwan, doesn't matter. Nobody can compete with the golden boy Israel. All the top priority now is supply ammunition to Israel so Israel can continue to bomb children in Gaza. And that's why right after Israel announced it's going to wage war on Gaza, Biden authorized a special emergency shipment of arms, ammunition to Israel, because Israel cannot wage a prolonged war without U.S. support, military support, without the ammunition support, and Israel always have top priority. I'm sorry, you just cannot compete with Israel, Zelensky. You have the wrong passport, and this is a confluence of factors, and also Russia is winning on the battleground. I still remember beginning earlier this year, there's a big Twitter space. Everybody was saying, oh, we're going to march on Moscow, we're going to regime change, Putin, and like Russia is a paper tiger. They're hauling out World War II tanks to fight the battle. They're using refrigerator chips to power their war machine. The Russian is collapsing. This is the same thinking that led Hitler to say, he just need to kick the door and the Soviet Union will fall apart. It's the same Western hubris that fuels all these war hawks in Washington. And now they have to face a reality. Russia is winning the war in Ukraine. The Ukraine offensive was a complete fiasco, a disaster. It just managed to get even more Ukrainian men killed. And the Ukrainian manpower is drying up. I mean, there's only so many people you can send to the slaughter. That right now, what have happened in Ukraine in the past 2 years is obscene. It's all these, half the male population was served up on this massive human sacrifice they're offered to preserve the U.S. hegemony. But the the Ukraine manpower is drying up, and the U.S. is finding its resources stretched to finance two wars, even proxy wars. So now this is why people in the Congress are getting cold feet. They also finally realize the Ukraine war now is deeply unpopular inside the United States. The American public, as well as American politicians, they can easily sign up for a war where they have to pay a little cost, because everybody like to grandstand. It's like we are on the right side of history. We'll do the right thing. But once they find out what the cost is, which has been high inflation, all the sanction on Russia is a total disaster for the European and American economies. I have just visited. You came back from the United States. I can confirm. I got a sticker shock when I went to Carl's Jr. I'm like, this is supposed to be a fast food restaurant. Why am I dropping like more than $20 on a combo meal? And then the Congress is finally waking up to the fact that Ukraine is not a popular war. That's why you have populists like the Vivek Ramaswamy in the Republican presidential debate saying, he's going to make peace. And by the way, I don't think Vivek is gonna be the president. What he's trying to do, be the running mate of Trump, and that's why he's not condemning Trump. So, but the way Biden is carrying on, we are looking very likely at a Trump presidency in 2024, and all the Republicans can see which way the wind is blowing, and so these are all the reasons why now the whole rhetoric is changed. It went from unlimited support for Ukraine to like Ukraine is almost like it doesn't even occupy the headline anymore. It's all Israel now. It's not Israel and Palestine, because all Congress people have to stand by Israel, right? So Ukraine, what is that? They can't find Ukraine on the map anyway, and then now they need to they have focused their limited attention span, and so it's done. It's done. I mean, I think anybody can recognize that Russia has won. Now we're not talking about when the Russian victory will come. We're talking about how much Russia will win. What does the Russian victory will mean? Whether it means Russia will keep the territorial gain so far, or it means Russia will go all the way to Odessa and cut off, turning Ukraine into a landlocked wrong state, which is increasingly likely scenario. And like I said, so the only two things Ukraine keep Ukraine afloat it's the Ukrainian manpower and Western fundings. Both are drying up. So everybody like winners. Okay, I'm sorry. Everybody likes to back the strongest horse. And right now Zelensky is increasingly looking like a loser. And And that's why we have the Times article basically castigating him as this crazy loony guy that thinks he will enjoy unlimited support from US. And then we have those Washington Post article blaming Ukraine for bombing Nord Stream, right? So Ukraine, they're going to be the fall guy. Zelensky is going to be the fall guy. They are, and there's also talks about a secret, like a negotiate. US right now is actually behind the back door trying to negotiate a way out. So I wouldn't be surprised. There's already some backroom dealings that US is trying to make some deal with Russia behind the back of Zelensky, because at the end of the day, Ukraine, they're just a pawn. They're just a proxy. US has no respect for its vassal states as its proxy, which should serve a lesson to all the other potential proxies and vassals for United States. Like they don't get your back. They don't got your back, right? You may go to the bat for the Uncle Sam, but Uncle Sam is not gonna get your back. Get your back. Not for more than 2 years, because we're less than 2 years into the war, and US is already thinking about cut and run. So we live in interesting times, Rashid, and I'm actually happy how things are turning out, because the US empire is crumbling in real time in front of our eyes.
It's amazing that you just ended with that. I was getting ready to say something similar to that and connect it with what's going on in North Africa and the Middle East, and how just recently the Chinese shipping company OOCL halted shipments to the Israeli regime, how other shipping companies are starting to halt shipping. We see the United States saying that Lloyd Austin says that a multinational operation to secure the Red Sea amid Houthi attacks is underway. And on top of that, we're seeing America under pressure in Syria also, as she tries to steal more of the resources from Syria. As a matter of fact, yesterday she stole over 100 trucks of oil, gas, wheat, and corn from the third of the territory that it occupies. I want you to listen to this short clip, and I want you to communicate with me on your thoughts on all of this, and is this causing the empire to buckle under its global obligations to try to police the world? I want you to listen to what this guy is saying right here.
The U.S. has two purposes in occupying the eastern third of Syria completely illegally, of course. One purpose is to deny Syria the ability to undertake reconstruction, because the U.S. is plundering the oil and wheat resources so that Syria doesn't have the money to reconstruct itself after 12 long years of failed U.S. regime change war, which was supported by the U.S. allies, such as, unfortunately, Canada. That's reason one. Reason two is the U.S. officials have openly stated that they're occupying the eastern third of Syria in order to use that occupation as a bargaining chip in the final settlement over the end of the U.S. proxy war in Syria. So the U.S. is in there illegally. They know they're there illegally, but they're staying there because they're using it for a foreign policy goal. And it just shows the utter hypocrisy of the U.S. In condemning Russia for its military presence in Ukraine, while at the same time they're occupying the eastern third of Syria. And we know that the U.S. That the Russians are in Ukraine because the U.S. and NATO provoked them into being into a war in which NATO expanded 800 kilometers eastward, despite a promise made in 1991 to Mr. Gorbachev, and they have provoked the war with Russia because they have pushed their expansion right to the gates of Moscow. So the U.S. is an aggressive empire. It is waging wars around the world. or destabilizing countries from Syria to Ukraine to Taiwan to Cuba, because the U.S. has one thing in mind, and that is hegemony. In other words, it seeks to dominate the planet.
So, do you believe that being under strain and stress in Ukraine, she's losing in Ukraine, she lost in Afghanistan, she's losing in Iraq, she's trying to stoke tensions with Iran to initiate a war there. Do you believe that she has something called a scorched earth policy, that if she, if she can't dominate, she won't leave it in a position to prosper after her, and it's like sour grapes? What say you on the matter?
If you look at the effect of the U.S. policy, it's basically, let's not talk about intention. Let's just look at the effect. The result of the Ukraine war is the European economy is being devastated. So all the German industrialists are getting up and left. They took their plants and moved them to U.S. where there's still available cheap gas. So the end result is a chaos. What United States is trying to profit from the chaos it instigates around the world. It seems so. So you make when there's fire on all the continent, you'll make U.S. kind of the last remaining calm, the place of calm among the sea of turbulence. So all the foreign capitals then will have no choice to flow back to United States. Mm-hmm. This is the goal. This is the goal to, like I talk about this many times. U.S. is trying to cannibalize its allies, which is that's what the Ukraine war actually accomplished. A lot of Biden has talked about onshoring manufacturing over and over again. But guess what? Those manufacturers are not coming back from China. They're not, or from East Asia. Those manufacturers are not coming back. The ones that are coming back is also German manufacturers, because they had no choice, because they got cut off from the Russian gas. And so in a way, they see the U.S. can only succeed when there's instability all around the world. So they create this instability, light the fire everywhere else, force the foreign capitals to come back, recycle their U.S. dollar reserves into the U.S. economy. And about the Syria case, United States has been occupying the most oil-rich and grain-rich region of Syria. The most productive agricultural land, most productive oil fields, and it has done that. The official reason for U.S. going to Syria was fighting ISIS. Well, okay, if ISIS is done, so why are you still there, right? Because we cannot deal with Bashar al-Assad. By the way, U.S. still imposed a crippling sanction on Syria on top of like sponsoring a 12-year-long war, proxy war against the Syrian government. It's really obscene. It's really trying to strangle Syria. But right now, even the U.S. military base in Syria and Iraq are under pressure, because they are supporting Israel, and they're also, trying to redirect, make Iran a target, because Iran supports Hezbollah and Israel is scared of Hezbollah. So they want U.S. to apply pressure on Iran. But the result is opposite. So U.S. sent two aircraft carrier into the region, but all these U.S. bases in Syria, in Iraq, right now they're sitting ducks. Originally they were occupying force, but now they themselves are targets of the different militias in Syria, in Iraq. They're like, okay, you know what? We can't touch your aircraft carrier, but you got all these bases right here in our country. We can just launch rockets at you day and night. And so all these U.S. military personnel, they're now hunkered down in their bunkers, like they don't know when is going to be the next rocket attacks. And this kind of negated the whole purpose of U.S. have them there in the first place. Now they're these unfortunately these U.S. military personnel are now human sacrifices. Human sacrifices that the United States government offer to maintain its own hegemony. They are sitting ducks. Where can they go? And they're surrounded by people who are hostile because people resentful of the fact that they're the occupying force. They're sitting on their land, and then same thing. U.S. sent 2 aircraft carrier into the region to support Israel, yet they cannot manage to keep the sea lane open. Houthis just managed to completely shut down this Red Sea route. As you mentioned, many companies have pulled out. The Chinese shipping giant Costco is the latest one. And the funny thing is, after they said they suspended Red Sea route, their stock price went up. their stock price actually soured. So and not just mainland China, but also Hong Kong and Taiwan shipping companies also announced they are suspending the Red Sea route. So now we have almost 60% of the world's shipping company already announced they're suspending going through the Red Sea. And this is why the I think it was USS Eisenhower that was previously stationed at the mouth of Persian Gulf to try to intimidate Iran. Now they're pulling out, going to redeploy to Red Sea. And I don't know who is joining their so-called multinational task force, because they're already complaining. I saw on Twitter people complaining like, oh, the Houthis captured this vessel and there's like 2 Chinese warship just sitting by and they're not doing anything. Why should China do anything? Why should China stick its neck out to save Israel? Like, that's U.S. job. Now U.S. is complaining that China is not helping. This is all they can do now. They complain that China is not helping them to fight Russia. They're complaining China is not helping Israel. It's like, look, China is not your bitch. China has its own priorities, and China's priority is not Israel. Why should China care about your own little pet project of dominating Middle East and trying to preserve your own global hegemony? Why should China help out? So it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm guessing United States might be able to round up a couple of its Anglo vassals like Australia, maybe Canada, UK always sign up, and let's see. I mean, but the Red Sea, they have very narrow openings, and the Houthis, they're in a good position. They're camped out in the highlands, right? And they have tons of missiles piled up from the Cold War and later. So all these, we're gonna and there's a good possibility that Iran are supplying the Houthis right now, and providing with the technology, know-how to help them maintain those missiles. So U.S. We're gonna get to see what happens to a U.S. aircraft carrier where when he meets a missile barrage. Let's see. So I mean, like the United States, I think they still think they can throw their weight around. They still, this is right now we are seeing what we're witnessing is equivalent of the Suez Canal moment in the 1950s when France and UK still thought they are the top colonial dogs. So they want to intimidate strong-arm Egypt to preserve their ownership of the Suez Canal when Egypt said like, no, sorry, Suez Canal belonged to Egypt, and UK and France like, oh, we got to protect our investment or our investors, and send their navy in. And then at that time, both Soviet Union and US told them like, you need to stand down because we're not going to support that. Because at that time, US and Soviet Union are both competing for influence in Middle East. and particularly Egypt was an important nation. And now United States, the other decrepit and declining empire, is selling its ships to the same area, Red Sea, trying to preserve its own hegemony. We're gonna see how I don't have hopes for them. I mean, what can they do? Are they gonna blockade Yemen? Yeah, they did that before. They blockade Yemen for decades. They're gonna bomb Yemen, and this is just gonna inflame the more United. It looks like I lost my internet connection for a second. But United States, before the war, the recent conflict broke out in Middle East, actually managed to have like 40% favor ratings, among surveys around the world. Somehow they managed through Hollywood, all the brainwashing propaganda. Now it's at 10%, right? 10%, and those 10% are probably in all these so-called Western democracies, UK, Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, etc. But 10%, that's the U.S. global support right now, and the more they try, the more people will see the U.S. empire is in effect a paper tiger. Not only they're the bad guys, but they're actually weak. And so I'm waiting to see, what their so-called Red Sea convoy is gonna pan out. I just don't see any good options for the United States at this point.
Speaking of that, the so-called coalition, it says right here that Operation Prosperity Guardian is bringing together multiple countries to include, the ones we already know, the United Kingdom. And they put in two smaller nations just to say that it wasn't a NATO operation, but we know what it is. It's the United Kingdom, Bahrain, Canada, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, the Seychelles, and Spain to jointly address security challenges in the Southern Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. So with that said, it was something that you said before that I wanted to go back to. It's very, very important. And I think it went over a lot of people's heads, right? And it's amazing that you said that, because I addressed something similar to that on Patreon on December the 5th. And I was talking about a law that went into effect into China around that time, and how the United States went after China because of this new law that went into effect that when China is starting to restrict graphite, which is very, very important to the U.S. military machine. And it was no coincidence that prior to that law going into effect, the United States sent multiple people over there to try to talk the Chinese out of that. And then when the Chinese didn't go for it, they started talking about China's debt trap to the nations around the world. And then Moody's, out of the blue, hit them, downgraded China's credit rating. And then from that point on, the United States started issuing articles all around about China's real estate problems and its internal debt problems. And in that article that I was talking about, I said what they were trying to do is cause flight of capital so that it can come back to the United States and destabilize the Chinese economy. But in reality, if it destabilized the Chinese economy, as I said, that it would destabilize the entire global economy, seeing that the Chinese economy is now the central economy in the global economy, according to the IMF and the UN. So why do you think a lot of people missed that about that Chinese law that went into effect about the restriction of graphite?
Well, not many, because not many people understand the global supply chain. They didn't understand a lot of the critical materials and components are manufactured in China. And then China look at the picture, okay, US is sanctioning us on advanced semiconductors. We have all these very critical components that we export to the West, but they actually don't generate a lot of income. So why are we exporting them to United States. You know, China actually don't make a lot of money exporting graphite, right? It's a commodity. So, but it is a very important component they need to use in all the weapons and stuff. So it's easy. This is easy choice for China. It's like, okay, we lose a little bit of money, but it doesn't matter. This gonna hurt them a lot more than it hurts us. Okay, cut it off. And China has a list of these type of items. And because another thing is because the global supply chain is already in China. A lot of these components sometimes are a byproduct of the manufacturing of something else, right? So so people have heard about Chinese ban on gallium and germanium. And the gallium and germanium, they're byproduct of making, for example, aluminum. Because to manufacture just them on their own, sometimes it's unprofitable. But because China has a large aluminum production, and a large copper production, they can make them on the side and still making a profit exporting them. But again, them by themselves, because they're commodities, they don't actually make a lot of money. This is another reason why Wall Street types in US offsource all this production elsewhere in East Asia in the first place. And now China's like, okay, so they don't make a lot of money, but they're a very vital component of what you need in your weapons. You know what? Okay, we're gonna cut it off. and so these are just like as the start. There are many lists of items and materials that China could cut off at very little cost to itself, but it's gonna hurt Washington a lot more. So China has a lot of powders right now, dry powders. Like if the U.S. really want to escalate this Cold War, this trade war, they can up the ante anytime they want. And the United States knows this. That's why Janet Yellen said she's going to go to China again in 2024, and because they still need China to continue to buy the U.S. Treasury debt. This is why, I mean, maybe she also likes the mushrooms she enjoys in China, but this is why she goes all the time, because at the end of the day, like you often said, U.S. is a debtor nation. U.S. needs other countries like China or Japan to purchase its debt, and that's why they're panicking when China is redirecting some of the investment away from U.S. Treasury into the Belt and Road project. Because China's like, why am I keep on getting those IOUs when I can buy real physical stuff? When I can help build infrastructure, I can build ports, I can build mines, I can build all these things that will further tie all the global economy integrated to the Chinese manufacturing might. So why do I rather deepen my dependency on the whims of U.S. leaders who often do not make the best decisions by continually parking my money in U.S. Treasury? I mean, like they see what happened to Russia. So it's a simple choice. This is why U.S. is so dead set against Belt and Road Initiative. They don't care. First of all, they don't care about infrastructure or investment anyway, but they're so against it because they see China is directing capital away from recycling back to the United States like they traditionally do, except redirect it elsewhere to the rest of the world, and that United States cannot afford, because the traditional U.S. hegemony depends on the world pouring all the capital inside United States. That's if the capitals are leaving, then people, the dollar loses value, and people will come to wake up to see they really don't need keep U.S. dollar anymore, and and it's just a avalanche of effect that will lead to the collapse of the whole U.S. Financial system, and this is what they're trying to prevent. But I think they're fighting a losing battle, and this is why they're. There was a news. U.S. officials were in Mexico because they were concerned about increasing Chinese investment in Mexico. Because we talk about how the United States de-risking from China, just let all the Chinese manufacturers move in their factory to Vietnam and Mexico. So all the trade from Vietnam, Mexico to United States is shooting up. And so U.S. officials are now concerned. So, like, first of all, this is a bilateral relationship between China and Mexico. It's like, why do you think you're entitled to tell other countries how they conduct their business with other nations? Well, on the second is they're really just freaked out about how they really can't stop the China, the influence of China. Like it's like plugging the hole on a dam, right? The plug one hole and then another hole it come out, and it's a whack-a-mole, and the U.S. is fighting being very reactive to the rise of China, and they don't have a good solution. And the best thing they can come up with is continually destabilize the world, right? They continue to light fire all around the world, so you make United States seem a more calm place to park your money. That's their game.
On the article that I did on Patreon, I'm just going to read just one paragraph off here. And I said, on December 1st, the Chinese imposed export controls on critical elements like graphite and graphite products. It went into effect. These controls will have a major effect on the U.S. electric car industry, and will especially have effects on the military because of this vital component in the manufacturing of advanced technology and weapon suites. The implications of these new major restrictions could be far-reaching and totally devastating to the current and future U.S./Pentagon plans for modernizing U.S. military forces, because the use of graphite not only is for civilian sectors, but it is absolutely vital for the military. And nobody, you didn't hear anything in the Western press. You didn't, not even a smidgen of reporting on when this law came into effect. All we know is that there was a lot of articles that came out trying to destroy China's standing by saying that it was marred in debt and that the real estate was about to collapse, and that China has taken on this debt burden, that it's a house of cards. The projection of the elite of the West, that's what they were doing with the Chinese. And I often say this when it comes to that. If the first law of nature is self-preservation, even if, say, for instance, let's just give some credit and say, okay, what they say is right. China is marred in debt. Well, before China collapses, China would call the debt in that the United States owe. So it would still hit the United States worse than China. And it seems like to me that point goes over most people's heads. Why is that?
And there's good debts and there's bad debts. Right. The Chinese that went in to build bridges, highways, high-speed rail links.
Airports.
Chinese people are, they're seeing something. They're getting something for all these debt. Where does the U.S. debt goes to? U.S. debt goes to finance wars, right? It goes up. It literally goes up in smoke, and it's. Whereas the Chinese debt, at some point they're gonna get return on their investment. They're gonna get better transportation. That's gonna spur more further economic activity down the road. Where does the U.S. debt lead to? It leads to more debt, and right now, you talk about electric vehicles and all that. Look, United States, China is the largest manufacturer of batteries, of alternative energy, solar panel, whatever, and the U.S. U.S. cannot go alone, like without China trying to develop its EV industry. I mean, it could, but it won't be able to be very competitive. This is why they're concerned about Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers are now setting up plants in Mexico, because they know they're not going to be able to compete. But U.S. at the same time is continually to hollow out its own manufacturing, because Wall Street will say that's not profitable. It's not profitable to make steel. So Nippon Steel, the Japanese steel maker, Nippon Steel, just bought out U.S. Steel. This just happened. And this is so U.S. continue to deindustrialize because, according to the Wall Street logic, it's not profitable. Why don't you pile into more profitable thing like I don't know, like internet companies, like financing, like all the U.S. Whole economic structure is increasingly financialized nowadays, and that's where all the talent, all the resources are going to, because people understand, okay, that's where the money is. And so nobody cares about basic manufacturing, because we don't make that much money. It's, the other nation can have it. We can outsource to China, no problem. But at the end of the day, when you are fighting a war in Ukraine or elsewhere, if you don't have manufacturing, you're gonna run into trouble. Like especially at the same time you are trying to have a Cold War with China. Your most important supplier of all these goods, and then you're waking up. Oh crap! We don't have manufacturing capacity, and this is kind of the ridiculous situation we're in right now, because U.S. is not a it's an oligarchy, so they have many different business interest groups. All fighting out for their own share of the pie. So there's no long-term vision. There's no long-term plan. China has their 5-year plans. U.S. cannot have a 5-year plan, because after 5 years, they're out of the office. We don't know if Biden is going to be in the office after 2024. They can't make any long-term plans. They can talk about all these all the grand plans they want, but they might all be thrown out of the window after 2024. So this is the same short-term thinking that permeate from Wall Street to Washington, and this is why U.S. empire is reaching its limit right now.
And it is trying to, on one hand, beg China to buy debt, then wage a technological war against China, trying to isolate China, trying to make investors take their capital out of China. And at the same time, you hear people like General King. He has nothing positive to say about China. I'm going to play this video, and it's maybe 5 minutes, but I want you to listen to, because it seems to me that in the mind of Keene and others who are in the power structure, or who have been in the power structure, it is okay it's all right if America is the number one power. It's okay if America dominates in Asia. It's okay if America has the largest military, if she piles up more debt to fund the military. But if China does it, or if Russia does it, or if Iran does it, then they become belligerent and they want to dictate to the world, and they want to colonize the world. But America's bases around the world is not a colony. I want you to hear what General King has to say about China. And his thoughts on what should be done.
Meanwhile, back in Washington, the White House says it is now considering a task force to guard ships in the Red Sea from Iranian proxy forces after 3 international commercial ships were attacked 4 times. Over the weekend, the USS Carney, which was responding, shot down 3 drones linked to Iranian-backed Houthi rebels during those attacks. Here's White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on that.
We have every reason to believe that these attacks, while they were launched by the Houthis in Yemen, were fully enabled by Iran. We are in talks with other countries about maritime task force of sorts involving the ships from partner nations alongside the United States in ensuring safe passage of ships in the Red Sea.
Joining me right now is Fox News' senior strategic analyst. He is chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, back with us. General, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here. What is your assessment of the response to Iran, and how should the United States be responding after this weekend of attacks causing the USS Carney to respond?
Yeah, great, Maria. Certainly, I'm delighted to hear Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor to the President, finally mention the word Iran associated with proxy activity in the region. They've avoided using that word for all of those attacks that have been committed against U.S. bases by Iranian proxies from Iraq and from Syria. And now this Houthi attack is enabled by Iran, as were all the other attacks as well. So in my judgment, a couple of things need to be done here. Certainly, the defensive measure to organize a naval task force to protect commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, in these vital navigation trade routes, that's absolutely the right move. We've done it before, multiple administrations, and it has been successful. Second thing, though, that's defensive. If you want to stop the activity, you've got to step up and get offensive. And that is clearly go after the Houthis who are firing these rockets and missiles and drones. We know where they're coming from. We know where the drones are. We know where the people who are shooting them are. We know where the missiles and rockets are. Take a lot of that down and make that very painful for them. And then let's follow up on the word enabled by Iran that Jake Sullivan suggested is behind all of this, and hold them accountable. We have plenty of targets that Central Command can provide to the administration. I doubt they're going to do that, but it's something they should have done weeks ago when the when the Iraq and Syria proxies upped their game against the U.S. bases in the region. Well, but yes, the initial step with the task force is a move in the right direction.
I mean, does it feel to you like the U.S. and Iran are getting closer to some kind of an escalation here?
Well, I think the United States should escalate. In other words, to shut them down. Right. And yes, this is the calculation. Many people think, well, if you do, then we're leading to a war with Iran. But when you look at and analyze that 43-year Iran history, that's not the case. They use proxies because they don't want to be involved themselves. If they get directly involved with the United States, they lose their regime. They know that. So that their escalation, I think, would be very minor because they want to avoid war with the United States.
Well, I want to move on to Ukraine, but I also want to get into the NDAA and get your perspective there, sir. But first, Ukrainian President Zelensky is going to address U.S. senators at a classified briefing later today. They'll talk about the war, the need for another round of U.S. military aid. It's ahead of the procedural test vote on President Biden's $106 billion supplemental spending package tomorrow. The package includes more than $61 billion for Ukraine. The White House is warning that it's going to run out of Ukraine aid by the end of the year if lawmakers do not approve the additional funding. And we're also quite worried when we hear things like, we're running out of money, we're running out of ammunition. Watch this.
Congress has to decide whether to continue to support the fight for freedom in Ukraine as part of the 50-nation coalition that President Biden has built, or whether Congress will ignore the lessons we've learned from history and let Putin prevail. It is that simple. It is that stark a choice. There is no magical pot of funding available to meet this moment. As Director Young said, we're running out of money, and we are nearly out of time.
Your reaction, General?
Well, I think aid to Ukraine is essential. I think we can do both, certainly. I mean, national security for the United States begins at the border, and this thing that's been going on here for 3 years now is a disgrace. So certainly moving in that direction to provide some measure of security at the border is absolutely the right answer. To anybody that's concerned about that, as most Americans are, I certainly agree. But Ukraine funding is essential. When he's saying we're out of money, is that there's no more weapons that we can provide to Ukraine. What American people have to understand, the the reality is the center of gravity for Ukraine to be where they are today, their ability to defend against the Russian attack initially last year and to retake territory, 50% of the territory they've taken back. That's all due to U.S. and European assistance. If that stops, Putin wins. And guess who else wins? China wins, and so does Iran. That's the reality. We see now how joined at the hip these three countries are. We've got to take a look at a strategic view at this and recognize that U.S. vital interests are involved here. Putin will not stop if he prevails in Ukraine. We already see he has plans for Eastern Europe, and that would directly involve U.S. troops. Let's stop him now with Ukraine troops and our military assistance. It makes much more sense.
Well, the world has become so much more dangerous in the last couple of years, in my opinion, and you have called this out through the NDAA in the past. You've been critical of declines in defense spending, flat performances in defense spending. So now we've got the annual Pentagon policy bill once again at hand, the NDAA. It's been a vehicle for other policies, but in the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it increased defense spending by 3.2%. That was pretty much flat or even a decline when compared to inflation. What are your thoughts on the priorities for this current NDAA policy bill out of the Pentagon? How would you assess the numbers for defense spending, General, in this environment where the world has gotten so much more dangerous?
Well, it is just not even close to where we need to be. We know during the Cold War we needed about 6%, and that's where we are now. I mean, two wars are going on in our vital interest areas, Europe and the Middle East, and President Xi is threatening a war. We have got to get a defense budget right, finally. Yep. And the administration has got to change its priorities to do it. And that's where the rub is. They don't want to take away from the domestic priorities to fund defense adequately.
Yeah, that's right. And you've called that out for so long. And now here we are sitting in a position where the U.S. has a smaller Navy than the Chinese Navy, which is something you've pointed out over and over again. General, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you, sir.
So why is it okay for the United States to have a larger Navy or a larger armed forces or spend more on their military and have bases everywhere, and it's not considered aggressive, belligerent, or provocative? But when you want to assert your national sovereignty, your independence, and you're minding your own business while you're doing this, this becomes aggressive. And I say that we're also saying this. The United States will send a spy plane off the coast of China. China sends up one of its warplanes to escort it. It's aggressive. China didn't send the warplane off the coast of California. The United States sent the spy plane off the coast of China. Or why does the United States continue to do these things? And why do you think it goes over the average person's head that of the hypocrisy for the leadership in the military? You're muted. Hold on one second. You're muted.
Mute myself. Okay, so because we stand for democracy and freedom, Rashid. That's a standard answer. Because it's all these countries that hate us because of our freedom, right? And people buy into that shit because look, our public education is not the best in the world, and there has been relentless propaganda since birth in this country. And the fact that the couple things that it was interesting what he said. He said he already said there's a map with all these U.S. military bases in Syria and Iraq, and he's like, oh, we're under attack. It's like, the question should be, why do we have all these military bases in Syria and Iraq? And see, that's a real question. And again, he said, we should just escalate to hit Iran because they won't dare to hit us back. And that is their logic. This is the same logic that got us to Iraq war, because it's going to be a cakewalk, right? People are going to welcome us with flowers because they really think it's going to be a cakewalk. But even right now, even for crazy people like him, like the General King, there's still people in Washington realize that going to war with Iran will be a disaster. It will be a much bigger disaster than going to war with Iraq. And because Iran, first of all, is a much more bigger country, much higher population, and lot more capacity to inflicting pain. Right now, U.S. is having trouble. Like world's supposedly most powerful navy can are losing out basically to a country without a navy. That's Yemen. And think about that for a second. And then they want to go after Iran. Iran could shut down the Strait of Hormuz at the mouth of Persian Gulf. That's going to be even 100 times even worse than shutting down the Red Sea route. Shutting down the Red Sea, you still have the option to go around the Horn of Africa, which costs 40% more time, more money, but there's still alternative. You shut down the Strait of Hormuz, that's a world's oil supply getting choked off right there. And so U.S. actually do not have good options. This is why, the Eisenhower that was originally the battle group that was originally sit at the mouth of the Persian Gulf to intimidate Iran is now redirecting, heading the other way to the Red Sea. And U.S. just do not have good options at this point. And the whole rhetoric is they still follow the same domino theory from like Vietnam Wars. Like we have, so the idea is we have to fight Russia in Ukraine, otherwise Russia is going to fight us in Eastern Europe. Or if we don't win, this is going to we don't win in Ukraine, this is going to allow China to win or Iran to win. This is ridiculous. And this is completely ridiculous. What does Ukraine have to do with the security of the United States? He says of vital strategic interest. No, it's not. No, it's not. Ukraine was part of Soviet Union. United States was fine. United States was fine during this time. And so this has nothing to do with the fact that it's the vital interest of the United States. It's of vital interest to the U.S. defense industry, to the U.S. military-industrial complex. Yes, it's vital interest because U.S. can continue to sell their weapons. But even the U.S. military-industrial complex, which is raking in a lot of money right now, they still cannot bring themselves to supply basic needs of the Ukrainian armed forces at this point, at this juncture. And so he said, yeah, we could totally do both, Ukraine and Middle East. No, we can't. No, we can't. You can't even make 155 millimeter shells. And guess what? Israel need them too now. And you want to start a war with Iran? That's just this is just crazy thinking. And the fact that and then they also, of course, thinking about escalating in Taiwan. The two front war is not enough, so you start a 3-front war, and that's just these people. The fact that these people are even at the senior level at some point in the United States government should tell you how crazy the U.S. leaders are, and then we have completely cut off from reality. And we're gonna see the U.S. Armada that's sailing to the Red Sea, and he said we know where they are, we can't hit them, and then what? You're gonna send ground troops to Yemen? That's crazy. That's crazy. Like that, you're not gonna. I don't remember when was the last time like a foreign power sent their troops to Yemen and won. Egypt sent their troops to Yemen in the 1960s. They had to withdraw. Egypt at that time was one of the most powerful military force in Middle East. This is the last thing you want to do is send U.S. military into the highlands of Yemen to secure Israel's supply line, so they can avoid a 40 days delay by going through the Horn of Africa. This is completely ridiculous. But I don't think they can shut down Houthi, or much less than shut down Iran, because the Red Sea is a very narrow body of water, and every single part can be covered by missiles from land, from Yemen. So I mean, including U.S. warships, by the way. So I don't think U.S. have good options. They can talk a big game. They can huff and puff on Fox TV, but the proof is in the pudding. We have to see what happens. What can they do? The fact is, the shipping company, they hate risk. Even if the U.S. military is there, quote unquote, provide escort, why would any shipping company take the risk of being hit? When they just take the longer route around, 40 days, they just pass the extra cost to their customers. That's the most sensible way around. That's why most of the shipping companies are suspending their Red Sea route. So even with the U.S. military presence in the Red Sea, it doesn't mean they're going to restore the sea route. I mean, the sea route is going to be shut down for the foreseeable future for now.
Before I post a comment directed to you, I wanted to say, do you see the exceptionalism in what he says? He says that U.S. interests in the region. He talks about Asia. He talks about Ukraine. He talks about Iran. How can the U.S. interests be more dominant than the nations in that region? Like in the Middle East, how can the U.S. have more interest in West Asia than Iran? Or how can they have more interest in Ukraine than Russia? Or how can they have more interest in the South China Sea than China? Hold on, the South China Sea.
Well, because when he says U.S., he's not talking about U.S. as a U.S. nation state. He's talking about the U.S. empire. When you put it that way, it is, sure, it is. It threatens the position of U.S. empire to be the global hegemon when it's facing all these fires. But you can't say on television that United States is the empire. Right, and like a lot of you Americans actually don't realize that. They don't realize the U.S. is the empire, but that's what it is. This is why the U.S. empire interest is in Ukraine. The U.S. empire interest is in South China Sea, is in the Middle East, and right now we are doing whatever it takes to maintain the U.S. empire, and even if it's at expenses at the average Americans, even if it's at the expenses their healthcare, their education, their infrastructure. It's you got to support the U.S. empire, because democracy and freedom, whatever those words means in the U.S. context, because so you can choose between Biden and Trump in 2024.
So here's a Constant Steady has this to say to you. He says, he or she says, curious if Carl has any information or opinion on the new Sino-Viet security agreement that have been getting very vague descriptions from both nations' state media.
Well, I mean, this is very simple. So they agreed to have joint patrols in the Gulf of Tonkin, and this is actually the China and Vietnam, they actually demarcated their border in the 2000s. So a lot of people, especially in the West, all they know is that like Sino-Vietnam War in 1979. So the conflict between China and Vietnam actually dragged out from 1979 to throughout the 80s. I was in China in the 1980s, because that was basically the end of the latter half of the Cold War. It was the Sino-Vietnam conflict. It's basically an outgrowth of the Sino-Soviet split, right? But this is why when Soviet Union was on its last legs in 1990, Vietnamese officials went to China. They met with the Chinese leadership then. They had a talk. They had a talk in Chengdu, and the end of result of that is the de-escalation and the end of hostilities. So start from the 1990s, China and Vietnam settled down. They settled their borders. All their land borders are now settled. And now they also went down to demarcate their maritime boundary in the Gulf of Tonkin. So there's no dispute in the Gulf of Tonkin. So now they're agreeing on joint maritime patrol in that area. This means they still have an area of disagreement. Of course, there's still dispute in the rest of the South China Sea. But what they're saying is right now we agree to disagree, and we work on the area that we already agree. Right, so because they already settled down the maritime border in the Gulf of Tonkin, we set the joint patrol. This shows that we can work together. Right, we set aside our differences and we work on things that we can work with, that we both agree. And this is actually the most sensible policy for any nation in a bilateral relationship. And another important thing is both China and Vietnam pursue a very similar foreign policy, which is to be enemy of none, to be friends with all and enemy of none. And Vietnam does not want to be dragged into a Cold War between United States and China. That's what U.S. wants. This is why U.S. in its mainstream media really hyped up the Biden visit to Vietnam. They're talking about the strategic partnership between U.S. and Vietnam, etc. But what they didn't tell you is China and Vietnam had a strategic partnership since 2008. So China and Vietnam has already been a comprehensive strategic partnership for 15 years. And Xi Jinping coming to Vietnam is just reaffirming that. And the Chinese trade with Vietnam, the mutual trade, is more than $200 billion. It's about the same size as China's trade with Russia. That's how big the bilateral trade is, $200 billion. It's going to increase because of United States, because U.S. is de-risking from China and pressuring companies to move their operation out of China. So all the Chinese manufacturing now they're going to Vietnam, setting up factory in Vietnam so they can still export to United States. And so this is why the official trade data between U.S. and China is going down, but the official data between China and Vietnam and Mexico is going way up, and the export from Vietnam and Mexico to U.S. is going way up. So U.S., China, and Vietnam, they're complementary economies. In this particular instance, getting around U.S. sanctions, their interest is aligned, and so the Chinese. Currently, China is the largest direct foreign investor in Vietnam, and that's only going to increase. And China itself, its economy is also restructuring because it's moving up the value chain. China started with the intensive labor-intensive manufacturing for low-margin stuff like toys and shoes. That's how many economy in the East Asia started. But then they gradually acquiring the skill of manufacturers, they gradually move up the value chain. They started to build electronics, they start building calculators, they start building computers, they start building TV, refrigerators, and now they're building electric cars, right? So they are, and also Chinese population is also finally reaching a peak because the Chinese population is no longer growing. So it also makes sense to move all these labor-intensive industries outside of China. So that process started way before U.S. talking about de-risking. Now the U.S. policy is just accelerating the existing trend. Now the lower margin labor intensive factories are going to move to Vietnam. At the same time, China is helping Vietnam to upgrade its infrastructure. China already built Hanoi's metro system, and Vietnam, they agreed to work on a further railway link. So right now, there's a colonial era rail between Vietnam and China. They're going to upgrade that. They're going to make it a standard gauge because the French built like this very narrow gauge railway, 1 meter long railway gauge from Hanoi to Kunming in southern China. It's like 100-year-old railway. right? Now both sides are like, okay, it's time for upgrade. So China already had the high-speed rail going to Laos, and they're gonna build a branch into Vietnam. The whole idea of the Pan-Asian railway links, the railway links, it means there's going to be a whole rail network stretching from South Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, all the way to Singapore. So one day you can take a high-speed train from Shanghai to Singapore. I mean, that is a grand vision. China is tying the region together. And another thing is, all this railway land link also kind of bypass the chokehold at Strait of Malacca, which is U.S. Navy is obsessed about choking the Strait of Malacca to stop shipping to China. So China is proliferating links elsewhere. They're building rail links, they're building ports, so they can, they're building pipelines. So they're all bypassing the Straits of Malacca. Now there are many. They call it the string of pearls strategy. U.S. Navy cannot be at all places at all time, right? Like they already showed they're being stretched in Middle East, even with 2 carrier groups. They still have to manage the shutdown of the Red Sea route. Right now, the linkage from China to the world no longer depend on a single choke point. And this is why China is working to improve its relationship with its neighbors. I mean, China and Vietnam are one of the last remaining communist countries, and their past hostility ended in 1990. Right around the collapse of the Soviet Union, and in many ways, China and Vietnam are very similar. I mean, culturally, China and Vietnam are probably the culturally most similar countries. And politically, they also have very similar. Both countries are communist countries, which had a long history. When Xi Jinping went to Vietnam, he said, "Our relationship is friends plus comrades, brothers plus comrades, brothers and comrades. That's our relationship." And so Vietnam has an interest to improve relationship with both China and U.S. So all these goods, all these Chinese manufacturers can keep on moving to Vietnam, making stuff in Vietnam and export to the United States. So this is a win-win for everybody. This is a win-win for everybody. And right now, China and Vietnam are making most out of it. And I don't know what U.S. is getting out of. Right now, U.S. have this fantasy of turning everybody against China in the neighborhood. But nobody is buying. I mean, only the Philippines is signing up. Only Bongbong Marco is kind of signing up with the U.S. publication. Everybody else just want to do business with China. We continue to profit from the rise of the Chinese economy, because the gravitational pull of Chinese economy is such that when China rises, the tide raises all boats. It brings general prosperity to all over Southeast Asia. I would know. I'm in the neighborhood. I live in Bali. China built a power plant here in Bali. So all the lights, internet here. My internet the backbone was built by Huawei, right? And the electricity was generated by the Chinese built power plant on Bali. And my phones, is a Xiaomi phone from China. So everything here, we very much depend on China and trade with China. Nobody wants a conflict, just the United States.
Back 2 things. First of all, on the Malacca Straits, and America's plan to have that string of pearls to choke off China's shipping. Well, I mean, do they sit down as they're planning this? I'm saying, does the leadership of America understand that if you choke off China's shipping, you're shooting yourself in the head, because 93% of all your goods come from China. So in reality, you would be hurting yourself more so than you would be hurting China. And you can come in on that, and then there's something else I wanted to pose to you. Oh, you're muted.
This is because U.S. is still fighting the last war, right? They're still thinking about fighting the Pacific War against Imperial Japan. They kind of forget now the global economy is so linked. You don't need to blockade China. Chinese worker just gonna stop putting on the Chinese goods, load them on ships to America. It's done. It's like you don't need to send your navy to actually enforce a blockade. The Chinese will just stop making goods for you. It's easy. And this is why that they don't have a good strategy to counter the rise of China. They tried. So this is why they tried to with what they call the de-risking. They're targeting the high-tech sectors of the Chinese economy. They're trying to choke off the advanced semiconductors to China, but even that's failing. So it's the U.S. is fighting they're like Don Quixote. They're fighting the windmills. They're not gonna win. They don't have a good. First of all, like the whole idea of fighting rise of China is so misguided because, of course, because they're so used to last 200 years when China was downtrodden, because that was the time when Europe had its industrial revolution. You made them more powerful. But now, after 200 years, China industrialized. So with China's population, naturally, they're going to be the world's biggest economy. It's just going to happen. It's returning to natural balance of things. But this is something that's harder for them to accept, except for the people who are so used to the hegemony of the West for the last 200 years. They can't give that up. That's why they're talking about defending U.S. interests in the Middle East, defending U.S. interests in Ukraine, in South China Sea. It's all about defending the U.S. hegemony worldwide. But there's holes everywhere, and U.S. cannot be at all place at all time, and their policy of pushing China, Russia, and Iran together. That's one of the most moronic foreign policy decisions ever, right? They are forming they're pushing the whole Eurasian continent together, right? Like when all this major Eurasian land powers get together, they're unstoppable because they no longer need. They can just. China is building this land links with all these countries, to Middle East, to Russia, to Europe. So they are not at the mercy of the U.S. Navy. By the way, U.S. Navy also is on its way down because they can't even find enough people to join the Navy. They're like 20%. They missed 20% of their recruitment goals. They can't even find enough people to staff their greatest aircraft carrier, Gerald Ford. So, there's the whole empire it become more apparent. There's like sunlight coming through the holes everywhere in the U.S. empire. If the U.S. empire is a house, it's like there's holes everywhere. The sunlight is finally coming in. So I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this moment, watching the empire burn from far away, and yeah.
I want to say two more things, and we can close out. But I want you to address this. This is one thing right here, very important. So there's an article out on Sputnik News, and the title of the article is "U.S. would exhaust munitions within week in conflict with China over Taiwan." Congressman, and this is and I'm reading it for the first time, but this is the first paragraph, first 2 or 3 paragraphs. It says, Washington, U.S. Congressman Mike Gallagher sent a letter to Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks, pointing out that recent wargaming has shown the United States would deplete its supply of long-range, precision-guided munitions within a week in a potential conflict with China over Taiwan. And it says, it talks about that the United States does not have the sufficient amount of weaponry or cruise missiles or something. Now, Carl, if that is the case, and they've war gamed at least 20 war games, in each war game, the United States lost quicker and more devastating. And the only 2 war games that the United States did not lose so devastatingly to, they lost nonetheless, is when they employed futuristic weapons that they don't even have. It's on the drawing board, and that was the only thing that stopped them from losing so badly. With that said, and you know that the war game said that you can't beat China in Asia, and China supplies 93 to 95% of all the goods on the store shelves. Isn't it suicide to try to go to war with China? Because if they embargo you, within 2 weeks, all shelves would be empty. You have bankruptcies of businesses, massive unemployment. You have defaulting of shipping, train lines, trucking companies, and then eventually the banking system would collapse because the banks would need to be paid back. So a war on China would cause a collapse of the American empire. Just, I guess, for anybody to see, why aren't any of the leaders talking about this?
Well, one, they're delusional, in denial, and 2, most of them are not even serious. They're raising all these specter of China threats so they can funnel more money into the U.S. defense industry. This is why they always say, we never have enough weapons. We don't have enough weapons. It's going to be disaster. The U.S. empire is falling. We need more money. We need more money to go into our defense industry. This is what they always say because they're in the pockets of those U.S. defense industries. They're getting their palm greased, and it's a con. They're continually printing more and more money, directing those money that's printed first to the defense industry. In the end, like somebody have to pay that cost, right? And the cost come from average working class Americans. But this is how they justify it, because we need to make. They can't say we need to make all these Lockheed Martin executives have even fatter salaries. They can't say that. Instead they have to say, you had to defend our strategic U.S. interests. We have to defend freedom and democracy. That means but we don't have enough weapons. We desperately need weapons to fight the big bad China. What they're really doing is lining their pockets, and this game continues because in many ways, because the mainstream media are also in cahoots with them. So nobody is calling them out, and a lot of the American people, they're so propagandized. They don't, they're not demanding a change to the whole system that got them into this trap in the first place. So this is why day in, day out, we see all these congressmen making all these crazy talks, and yet they're still getting reelected. They're still making money off the grift, and the U.S. the U.S. society is sinking deeper into the hole, and unfortunately, the side effect of that is not just grift. It's also U.S. is funding genocide in places like Gaza, because and U.S. is pushing the entire nation of Ukraine into a fire pit, and but hopefully we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, Rashid. I feel it. I think we're coming to the end. We're coming close to the end right now.
Now this is the last one, and we'll close out right here. My chair is squeaking a little bit, but hold on. I want to ask you this, a personal question. It's not just for the audience. This is from me to you. Do you believe that China has acquired a huge amount of gold and other commodities to insulate itself from the dollar collapse, and if war breaks out, America's trying to steal the $1 trillion from China like it did with the 300 billion or 600 billion with Russia?
Well, first of all, about gold, China is the world's largest gold producer. You know, a lot of the gold production is in China. China do not lack gold. And second of all, you know, what is money, right? Money, like China has a manufacturing capacity. They can continue to make goods. They have access to raw commodity through Russia, for example. You know, how is U.S. Navy going to cut off the China-Russia land border link, right? That's impossible. You know, Russia is one of the world's richest producer of all type of minerals and commodities, and so China has. This is why also China is building out the Belt and Road Initiative to further solidify and build more linkages, and all roads lead to Beijing. And this is Chinese manufacturing is not showing signs of stop, and they're still innovating. There's, you know, we're already seeing the Chinese. China now makes the most cars in the world, and then now they also make the most electric vehicles. There's a huge adoption of electric vehicle in China right now, and soon they're going to export them all around the world. You know, I wish I could get one in Bali, and so I mean, like China continue to build their economy. That's the end of the day. Whereas the United States, they continue to hollow out the domestic economy, to divert money to Wall Street, divert money to military-industrial complex. And, you know, this is not sustainable, Rashid. This is not sustainable. At some point, this house of cards got to fall down.
I think we're approaching that point. Carl, thank you so much for joining me again on this platform, man. I can't thank you enough, man.
Thank you, Rashid. It's always a pleasure.
All right, I'll get in contact with you. You be blessed. I also want to let everyone know on the platform to join me on Real Truth Talk in the morning, 9 a.m. Central Time. I'll be over there with my guy, and he'll be interviewing Scott Ritter. Also, Friday, do not forget to join us at 9 o'clock Central Time. I'll have Scott on the platform, and Real Truth Talk will join me over on this platform. So now we go out the same way we always come in, with love in our heart for you. If you love truth, know that the love that we have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Thank you, Odyssey. Thank you, Rumble. Thank you, Twitter. Thank you, YouTube, for letting my program air without a hitch. I really appreciate it. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and we out of here.